Hello, and welcome to my very first podcast for SIBA, a Luxembourgish study group on the Battle of the Bulge. My name is Ralph Cohn, and I'm truly excited to take you along on this fascinating journey through the events of the Battle of the Bulge during winter 1944. Starting today, I will regularly take you on a journey filled with powerful, gripping, and often deeply moving stories from that time. These are the stories that show how even in the darkest moments of war and destruction, small acts of humanity, hope and comfort could still shine through. But let's start slowly. What or who is SIBA? SIBA is a Luxembourg-based association dedicated to researching and remembering the Battle of the Bulge. Founded in 1972, SIBA is committed to preserving the stories, emotions, and fates of our American liberators and the Luxembourg civilian population, men, women, and children who, under the most difficult circumstances, became part of history during this horrific time. Our mission is not only to document historical facts, but also to capture the human moments that shaped this war. Moments of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable will to survive. But let's go back to the beginning. Today I want to share a very special story with you, one that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, a small ray of comfort can make a big difference. It's the story of little Eddie, a young boy who in a moment of panic and fear experienced something truly extraordinary. A brief encounter with an American soldier who didn't just give him chocolate, but for a short moment brought him hope and peace in a world torn apart by chaos. This story reminds us that even in the midst of war, there is still room for humanity and warmth. So come with me now. Let us step into a time that shows us just how precious peace really is, and how even the smallest gestures can carry great meaning. Let's begin with a powerful and moving story of little Eddie, a story titled by its author, the late US GI Albert D. Diane, My Most Memorable Christmas. Just 2 weeks before Christmas in 1992, my father, Camille Cohn, former president of SIBA, received a letter from Mrs. Elizabeth Diane from Florida. In her warm and heartfelt message, Mrs. Diane shared that before her husband passed away in July 1992, he had written down a story about a wartime experience he had in Luxembourg.
My husband, Albert Daniel Diane, always hoped that this Christmas story could be published one day, if possible, in a Luxembourgish newspaper, so that the people mentioned in it might recognize themselves. Al was part of the cannon company of the 318th Infantry Regiment of the 80th US Infantry Division. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1944, he took shelter from German shelling in a house near Ettelbruck, Colmar-Berg. In the basement of this, at first unidentified house, Albert met a little boy with blonde curly hair who was hiding there with his parents from the German artillery attacks. Sadly, my Albert passed away far too soon, but he never forgot the name of that little boy. His name was Eddie.
That's what we knew from Betty Diane, the letter writer from Orlando, USA, a widow who, after her husband's passing, kindly and persistently expressed one heartfelt wish: to uncover the identity of the little boy called Eddie. Driven by that wish and the strong determination to explore every possible lead, my father began his search to find this little boy Eddie. He started with the city administration of Ettelbruck, a city in northern Luxembourg, where he made a call to someone he knew well, Mr. Pfeiffer, the town secretary at the time. Ettelbruck Municipality, Pfeiffer speaking. Hello. There over the phone, he shared the Christmas story from the basement, a story that had suddenly become more than just a memory. It had become a mission. Over the phone, he asked the town secretary to check the archives to find out who or which family had been living at the Sherwin Mill in 1944. My father had simply assumed that the story must have taken place somewhere between the two villages of Welsdorf and Grenzingen in northern Luxembourg. But then, after he had described the entire scene from the basement of the farmhouse in vivid detail and asked Mr. Pfeiffer if he could help identify the little boy Eddie, something unexpected happened. There was a surprise, one my father hadn't seen coming. Mr. Pfeiffer gave him an answer he never could have imagined.
But Camille, that's easy. That little Eddie, that was me.
And with that simple, almost casual sentence on the phone, the identity of little boy Eddie was revealed. It was Eduard Pfeiffer himself, the town secretary of Ettelbruck and longtime master of ceremonies for the city's annual Remembrance Day, who turned out to be little Eddie. Just before the German troops entered Ettelbruck, the Pfeiffer family had fled the town and found refuge in the dark basement of the Brosius farm. Sometimes coincidences happen in the most remarkable ways. And now, let me share with you the most powerful moments from a story that stayed in one man's heart for a lifetime. My most memorable Christmas by Albert D. Dion.
Around December 22nd, 1944, my unit moved out of the Mersch area and headed toward Ettelbruck. We passed one of those classic guardhouses you see in old movies, with the ceremonial guards in their theatrical uniforms. Just as we reached the guardhouse with our vehicles, suddenly a barrage of German Nebelwerfer rockets began raining down in the area. The guards quickly vanished, running off toward the Grand Ducal Castle at Colmarberg. On December 24th, 1944, we set up our command post in an abandoned farmhouse and immediately began laying telephone lines to the various platoons. Apparently, our position had been spotted by an enemy observer because soon after we came under fire from German artillery shells. We had no choice but to take cover in the basement beneath the house. In that dark cellar, we found a mother, a father, and their little boy huddled together in the corner, terrified and frozen in fear. By the light of a candle, I began handing the frightened little boy Eddie small gifts. I still remember his name as clearly as if it were yesterday. With every gift I gave him, his parents were moved to tears, answering each one with a heartfelt, quiet thank you that I can still hear in my soul. That moment reminded me of another silent night long ago in Bethlehem, and I couldn't help but think, maybe this is how the three wise men felt when the child in the manga smiled back at them.
For 48 years, Albert D. Dian's memory of little Eddie never faded. If this story had reached Luxembourg just a little bit earlier, the two might have shared a moment together, face to face, across time and memory. But fate had other plans. Death came too soon, and so it was only his widow Betty who would experience the joy of learning the true identity of little boy Eddie. And with that, we have reached the end of our very first podcast episode. I truly hope you found the story of little Eddie as moving as I did. It reminds us just how important it is to hold on to the human moments, even in times of chaos and war. Yes, war brings suffering, but it is these moments of compassion that reveal the true strengths of the human spirit. Thank you for listening and for caring about the stories that connect us all. This is only the beginning. Soon we will set out on another journey into a new story from the time of the Battle of the Bulge. Because the stories of the Ardennes offensive don't just speak of the brutality of war, they speak of human resilience too. And it's up to us to keep these memories alive, so the lessons of the past are never forgotten. Take care, cherish peace, and until next time on the SIBA podcast.